Hi, my name is Sophia Klaits, and as you can tell from my accent and the pictures behind me, I'm an American. Now, many people, when they think of America, they think of phrases like land of the free, best democracy in the world, economic superpower. And these are ideals which inspire many other countries across the world to do better. However, unless you've been living under a rock these last few years, you might have noticed that the America that is represented in these phrases has not exactly been living up to those ideals, shall we say. As a senior in my last few weeks before graduation, I look around this outside world and I ask myself, is this really the best we can do? This is a world where people like Jeff Bezos can make more in 2 days than Tanzania spends on its entire health sector per year. How is it that there can be people with so much and others with so little? This is something that I really struggle with wrapping my head around, and I've often pondered if there's a better system. Maybe it's this. Now, when you see this word, some of you might shudder. Certainly if you're an American, this word can bring up visions of the Cold War, the horrors of the Russian gulags, the Red Terror, but before you start freaking out and imagining I'm Stalin or I'm carrying the Communist Manifesto in my backpack, let me clear some things up. I'm not interested in bringing back Mao or Castro or recreating that kind of world. Unfortunately, throughout history, you have people who use socialism as a means to get power, and instead of following through on the ideals behind that ideology, be it socialism, nationalism, communism, they just use it to gain support and legitimize their authoritarian power. I'm not interested in authoritarianism. I'm interested in some of what we can learn from prioritizing the community rather than the individual, as socialism intends to do. So let's go back to the basics. In simple form, capitalism believes that when we are in opposition to each other, we will achieve the truest and greatest heights of prosperity. Socialism, on the other hand, believes that it is not through opposition to each other, but rather it is through each other, through cooperation and community, that we will achieve the truest heights of prosperity. Just looking at this simple definition, I see something very, very wrong with this capitalist definition. If we are to assume that the only way to prosperity is through infighting, creating disparities, and bigger inequalities, then how are we ever going to overcome inequality? Why is it that we believe in a capitalist framework and doubt a socialist one? Well, let's explore the why. There are a lot of reasons why this might be. I will go into 2 reasons that I've personally come across. The first is commodity fetishism. Don't let this term intimidate you. I'll walk you through it. So commodity, these are products. This is the stuff we buy and sell. Fetishism is an obsession or an over-obsession. The term together describes the process by which we over-obsess over the stuff and we lose our human connection to the means of production. But what does this mean in reality? Well, let's take an example. Show of hands, who here orders off of the cheap clothing website Shein? Well, who here orders off of Amazon? Well, you might have seen or heard of the well-documented evidence that Amazon employees are oftentimes denied bathroom breaks and have to pee in bottles, and even once had to ignore a factory death because of how strict working hours are made to be. And there's similar allegations made against the Shein working conditions. Workers are overworked, underpaid, and there are even cases of child labor. So these are companies that are still, pretty well funded and they're big and powerful. So I guess my next question is, how many of y'all knew about this and just buy from the companies anyway? Show of hands. Yeah, me too. If you're like me, I know about this, and yet I'm still someone that can't help but prioritize my own convenience and support these terrible conditions. How is it that so many of us can so easily ignore the fact that we are actively contributing to the continuation of inequality and unjust labor practices? Like, are we all monsters? What's going on? Well, the explanation I would give is commodity fetishism. We are becoming more and more distanced as a society from the people who create our products, that we no longer feel empathy for them. The focus now is on our own ability to get this stuff. Why? Well, it's because inside a capitalist world, it is no longer profitable or even logical to feel empathy for the means of production anymore. Why would you pay $78 for a bikini top on Reformation, a brand that actually treats its workers right, when you could get nearly the same thing for $5 on Shein? Just doesn't make sense, right? Well, let's go into another reason behind our acceptance of a capitalist framework: increasing individualism. If it's not freedom that America is known for, it has to be its incredible celebration of the individual. If nothing else, we excel at putting individual needs like paying less taxes over above even the most basic community services like universal health care. After all, if we weren't so obsessed with getting money and fighting our friends for a spot at the top of the social ladder, how else would we have achieved our status as economic superpower, many argue? Well, an unfortunate consequence of a system wherein we, fight our friends is social isolation. America has one of the highest rates of depression in the world. In 2023, a third report having it in their lifetime. And this is happening all over the world with increases in depression, suicide, and overall poor mental health. In Humphrey's meta-analysis, she showed that with the rise of capitalism worldwide, and as young people are becoming more competitive and self-sufficient to survive in this new economic system, psychological functioning is badly worsening. And this other study about increases in individualism worldwide show that individualism is very much linked with much higher rates of depression. So now that we've established that capitalism is linked to a number of negative social effects, I hope your next question is, what could take its place? Well, I would argue that implementing socialist policies is our first step towards building a better world. And in fact, there are many thriving societies with a socialist framework instead. For example, Sweden. This is a country I've long admired, and luckily one of my closest friends, Iris, has shared with me some of her experiences growing up in a society which is governed by socialist ideals rather than capitalist ones. She explained to me that between the 1930s to 1970s, after introducing a series of socialist policies like compulsory school, free school food, universal child health care, and subsidized daycare, Sweden was able to pave its way to prosperity. In fact, in the 1970s, Sweden became the fourth richest country in the world per capita, and they grew their GDP by 200%. And this was all from a foundation of protection. And this protection was sustained by lessening each citizen's self-interest a little bit by asking everyone to pay higher taxes than most other countries would. So, well, I'm convinced that capitalism is a central reason why there's so much poverty, inequality, and depression in the world. There are many that would challenge me and argue instead that these issues don't necessarily have to do with capitalism. It's just human nature. And the argument goes like this. Injustice and inequality are inevitable because we've had these unjust power dynamics since the dawn of time. It's nature. Think like predator-prey, right? The us versus them instinct, tribal rivalries. How have we learned to survive? Well, we've evolved to survive by being powerful and weakening others. Capitalism is just a logical conclusion of this. Well, here's what I say in response to this argument. We have survived throughout history through cooperation. Nature is upheld through cooperation, through laws of symbiosis, mutualism, and altruism. 80% of land plants rely on fungi. 90% of vascular plant families rely on microorganisms. If all of the plants just forgot this fundamental truth about survival, all of the jungles and forests would die. And the same is true with humans. Frans de Waal is a primatologist, and he analyzed the scope of human evolution. And he found that the long-term pattern of human history and development is not defined by our ability to oppose and conflict with each other, but rather it's defined by our ability to increase our scale of cooperation more and more. We've been able, over the years, to find ways to cooperate and take care of strangers through at first the creation of tribal bonds, then religious bonds, then national bonds. Think about it. If all humans were only ever interested in gaining individual immediate power, they never could have created these incredible networks of cooperation in the first place. So to summarize, therefore, it is not just peace and love that should compel you to demand social welfare programs. You should be concerned about general social well-being and cooperation because communal survival means your survival. Consider this. Why do you have food to eat every day? Well, it's because your cooks, local restaurant and store owners have enough money, health, and nutrition to get up every morning and provide it to you. It might seem like you got food yourself, right? Because to get food, it just takes money. However, this is misleading. Because of commodity fetishism, you're slowly forgetting that your entire way of life is actually upheld by an incredibly complex network of people who are cooperating because of good health, good spirits, and good nutrition. And as soon as these basic needs become precarious for them and unstable, it will for you as well. And we've seen this throughout history. Capitalism urges us to forget the true origin of our survival by distracting us with the idea that with money, we can buy our survival, right? We can just build a bunker or set up shop on Mars. This is having dire consequences on the most impoverished and underprivileged people among us. And as we've seen throughout history, it's only a matter of time before the consequences reach you too. So Mark Fisher is a political theorist, and he's pretty pessimistic about this whole situation. He believes that capitalism is slowly making us complacent to its unequal order by robbing us of our ability to even imagine a future that doesn't involve capitalism. So we're stuck. He calls this theory capitalist realism. I agree. Capitalism is creating a very powerful illusion that it is untouchable and perfect, that it is a reflection of our truest fundamental nature and it can never be changed. However, I would also argue that just like any oppressive system of power, it can only create an illusion. It can only really make it seem like our only choice is to obey. Obey its vision of what to value, its vision of how to behave, its vision of what our true nature is. In reality, the only way it can maintain its power is through our choice to obey. And regardless of how it may seem, that choice remains ours. From here, I'm not expecting anyone to enact the communist revolution or reverse any large-scale international world orders in my name. Instead, I want you to understand that you have the ability to rebel against oppression in small ways. Prisha said, butterfly effect. To do this strategically, I want you to look for the pillars of power which capitalism relies on to maintain this unjust structure. The first, commodity fetishism, right? It relies on a population that is unbothered by unjust labor practices. So remember, where are you buying things? Think more critically about who you're empowering with your purchases and what you're empowering. 2, it relies on social isolation and individualist priorities. So think about who you're affecting with your actions and build solidarity and community where you can. And 3, it needs you to forget your true nature and your role in continuing a long-standing tradition of cooperation and selflessness. So remember your place in the whole. If we can chip away at these pillars of power on individual scales and promote opposition through peaceful, organized action, I believe that we will be closer to creating a better world. Thank you.